Sam adjusted the cap of his janitor's uniform and looked around TechCore's towering office building. His father had insisted he start here, in the same company he'd known only from high-rise offices and boardrooms. Today, though, he wasn't Sam Darrow, son of the CEO, he was just a night janitor. Another invisible worker in a place that prided itself on innovation and excellence. Standing at the entryway, he watched high-ranking executives pass by, not sparing him a glance. He arrived at his first station, an expansive boardroom littered with half-empty champagne flutes, plates of discarded hors d'oeuvres, and the lingering smell of expensive cologne. Tonight, the company had hosted a late-night launch event for its latest product, and clearly the cleanup was left entirely to him. Sighing, Sam rolled up his sleeves, pulling the trash bag from his cart, and moving swiftly between tables, stacking plates, wiping down surfaces, and gathering scattered cocktail napkins. "Hey you, new guy." The sharp voice made him flinch. He turned to see a tall, sharply dressed man with a slicked-back hairstyle and a haughty smirk. Sam recognized him, Martin Grant, one of the senior executives, and a longtime fixer in the company, tasked with making sure things ran smoothly. Grant's reputation was legendary, though not for the right reasons. Ruthless in the boardroom, he was equally brutal with employees, especially those he deemed below him. "Don't leave those glasses there," Grant said, pointing to a corner of the table Sam had just cleaned. "And don't dawdle. We don't pay you to stand around and admire the decor." A few other executives in the room chuckled, giving Sam the same look of faint disdain. Sam kept his head down. "Yes, sir," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady as he moved to collect the glasses. Grant leaned in, his voice low but laced with mockery. "Tell me, do they teach you how to hold a trash bag at janitor school, or did you just sort of pick it up along the way?" Laughter rippled through the room and Sam felt his face heat up, but he forced himself to stay quiet, reminding himself why he was here. His father had insisted he take on this job without revealing his identity, believing it would teach him humility and give him a first-hand look at the company's foundation. Grant stepped back, crossing his arms. "Honestly, it amazes me how you people can't even manage basic tasks. It's as if attention to detail is some kind of foreign concept. This is TechCore, not some fast food joint." Sam clenched his teeth but kept his gaze on the floor, fighting back the urge to retaliate. The executives continued to talk amongst themselves, barely acknowledging him as they moved toward the door. He resumed his cleaning, but his movements were slower, his mind replaying Grant's words over and over. As he reached for a stack of discarded papers, he heard more footsteps. Another executive, a middle-aged woman with an air of casual disdain, nudged the trash can toward him with her foot. "Missed a spot, sweetheart," she sneered. "Thanks," Sam muttered, but she'd already turned away, laughing under her breath as she joined her colleagues. The message was clear. They didn't see him as a person. He was just the janitor, something to look down on and ridicule. He felt an uncomfortable pang in his chest, but reminded himself that this was just the beginning. He would get through this. Once he'd finished in the boardroom, he moved to the main lobby, where the evening crowd had started to dwindle. The harsh treatment didn't stop there. The front desk clerk raised an eyebrow as he passed, muttering, "Who hired this guy? He looks like he'd struggled to sweep a porch." Sam heard it clearly, but he kept his expression neutral, refusing to let them see his reaction. Over the next few days, things only got worse. It wasn't just Grant and his close-knit circle. Even lower-level employees seemed to have no problem treating Sam like dirt. They'd leave their trash on the floor after noticing him, whispering among themselves as if he were beneath them. Conversations would halt as he entered the room, followed by snickers and pointed looks. Sam could feel the weight of every sneer, every sidelong glance. One evening, as he was mopping the hallway near the executive offices, he overheard a conversation between Grant and another manager, Colin. They were standing by the water cooler, laughing loudly about the idiot janitor who didn't know the difference between a high-polished floor and muddying up the place. Colin shook his head. "Unbelievable, right? Just walking around with that blank stare like he's clueless." "Exactly," Grant replied, laughing. "It's almost a public service putting him in his place. Teaches these people a little respect, you know?" Sam kept his head down as he continued mopping, his grip tightening around the handle. But he didn't react. He couldn't afford to. Not yet. The abuse reached its peak when Grant orchestrated a humiliating prank in the executive lounge. Late one night, while Sam was on cleaning duty, he found the lounge door propped open with a sign that read, "Attention, please clean immediately." Inside, the floor was littered with empty coffee cups, crumpled paper, and remnants of a half-eaten cake. Sighing, Sam got to work, wondering how people could be so careless. Just as he was finishing, Grant burst in with several other execs trailing behind him. They feigned surprise, putting on exaggerated expressions of shock and disgust. Well, look who's slacking off," Grant announced, his voice booming across the room. "You're making the place look worse, not better." Sam opened his mouth to defend himself, but Grant cut him off, gesturing toward the mess. "Is this what TechCore pays you for? To lounge around and pretend to work?" Sam felt his pulse quicken, his patience wearing thin. He knew he had to stay quiet, to hold back, but the mockery in Grant's eyes was nearly unbearable. As he struggled to keep his composure, Grant continued, smirking. "It's as if these people don't even understand basic instructions. Tell me, did you just stumble in here off the street?" Before Sam could respond, another exec tossed an empty coffee cup onto the floor, grinning as if it were a great joke. "Oops. Looks like someone missed a spot." More laughter filled the room, each chuckle stinging like a fresh wound. Taking a deep breath, Sam forced himself to pick up the cup, his jaw clenched. But as he bent down, he saw the look of contempt on Grant's face and felt something shift inside him. This job had started as an exercise in humility, but now it felt like an exposure to the ugliest side of humanity. These people were blind to anything but their own power and privilege, and for the first time he wondered how many others had endured similar treatment. He finished his tasks without another word, but his mind was racing. If this was how the executives treated people, then TechCore had a serious problem, one that went beyond just him. They had built their culture on the backs of those they considered invisible, those they thought wouldn't dare to speak out. But Sam wasn't invisible, and he wasn't without power. He made up his mind that night. He would go through with his father's plan, but he would also take it further. This wasn't just about humility anymore, it was about justice. Sam's next weeks at TechCore became a test of endurance. Each day was marked by subtle, relentless hostility from nearly every direction. Senior executives strutted past him without acknowledgement. Low-level staff whispered insults within earshot, and he continued to face Grant's carefully orchestrated humiliation whenever possible. But each slight, every sneer, only strengthened Sam's resolve. One late evening, after finishing up in the executive lounge, Sam made his way to the cafeteria for a brief break. The place was mostly deserted except for a woman sitting alone at a table, staring into a steaming cup of coffee. She had a warm, approachable look, her long dark hair tied back, and an expression of quiet contemplation. She noticed him and waved him over. "You must be the new guy. Sam, right?" Surprised that someone knew his name, Sam nodded, pulling a chair across from her. "Yeah, that's me." "I'm Sarah," she said with a kind smile. "I work in middle management, mostly logistics." She looked him over with a sympathetic glance. "I've seen what they've been putting you through." Sam felt a pang of relief at her words. "So you've noticed?" "It's hard not to," she said, shaking her head. "Grant and his crowd can be unpleasant, especially if they think no one's watching." Her expression grew distant. "The culture here can be toxic. I know a lot of people who've suffered because they couldn't stand up to them." Sam considered her words, taking a sip of the coffee she offered him. "Have you ever thought about leaving?" Sarah gave a sad smile. "Of course, but it's complicated. Jobs like this aren't easy to find, and I have a family. I can't just walk away, even when things get rough." The two sat in silence for a moment, both feeling the weight of the unsaid. Sam felt a newfound determination stirring in him. Sarah's kindness contrasted sharply with the cruelty he'd endured, reminding him why he had come here. If there were people like her who couldn't speak out, maybe it was time he did something about it. That night, as he cleaned an empty conference room, he thought through his next steps. He had originally planned to endure silently, to learn humility and understand the company's inner workings from the ground up as his father had asked. But now it seemed he needed to do more than observe. If TechCore's problems ran this deep, perhaps he could find a way to expose them. The following day, Sam went about his work, carefully observing and recording everything around him. He noticed the patterns, how certain managers assigned extra tasks to the cleaning crew just before important meetings, creating impossible deadlines. He saw how those in Grant's circle exploited their power, not just with him but with everyone they considered beneath them. The quiet anger he felt was no longer just for himself, it was for every employee treated as less than human by those in power. One evening, as he was mopping the floor outside a closed-door meeting, Sam overheard Grant's voice booming through the door. "It's all about control, Colin. If people start thinking they're equals, you lose respect. Fear keeps the lower levels in check." Grant laughed, the sound cold and mocking. "As long as they know their place, we can run this company however we want." Colin laughed in agreement. "You've got a point. It's not like the cleaning crew's going to rise up anytime soon." Sam felt his jaw tighten as he listened. the arrogance, the total disregard for anyone they deemed unworthy was astounding. As he continued to eavesdrop, an idea started to form. If they believed themselves untouchable, maybe it was time they were proven wrong. He decided he would gather as much information as he could and present it to his father when the time was right. The next day, Sam ran into Sarah again, this time by the elevators. She gave him a warm smile and handed him a piece of paper. "My number," she said softly. "Just in case things get too rough, or if you ever need to talk. I know it can be isolating." Sam pocketed the paper, grateful. "Thanks, Sarah, really." He found solace in her small act of kindness, her willingness to acknowledge him, a nobody in the eyes of most. It was yet another reminder of the good people who were being overlooked, pushed down, and forgotten. Sarah didn't know it, but her support fueled him. She gave him the encouragement he needed to keep going, to take control of the situation. A few nights later, as Sam was cleaning the lobby, Grant approached him with a smug look, his arms crossed as he surveyed Sam's work. "You know, we don't need someone who's this slow," he sneered. "If you can't pick up the pace, maybe this isn't the job for you." Sam kept his expression neutral, refusing to give Grant the satisfaction of a reaction. "I'll try harder, sir." "Oh, I'm sure you will," Grant said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's all you're good for, anyway." But as he walked away, Grant glanced over his shoulder, as if expecting to see Sam break under the pressure. When Sam didn't react, Grant's smirk faded slightly, and he turned back toward the elevators, his footsteps echoing through the empty lobby. That night, Sam called his father, careful not to reveal too much. He simply mentioned that things were worse than they had anticipated and asked if they could discuss company culture at the next board meeting. His father agreed, trusting Sam's judgment, and scheduled a session in 2 weeks' time. The plan was in motion. In the meantime, Sam continued his work, deliberately avoiding confrontation but quietly undermining Grant and his allies where he could. He adjusted cleaning schedules to disrupt their routine, misplaced files Grant had carelessly left out, and made sure that every minor inconvenience was magnified. It was nothing overt, but enough to make them uneasy, enough to make them notice that something was off. One evening, while Sam was restocking the supply closet, Grant barged in, his face red with anger. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm done with you," he snarled. "Consider this your last warning." Sam met his glare, his expression calm. "I'm just doing my job, sir." "Your job?" Grant laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "People like you don't get to talk back. You're here to follow orders, nothing more." Sam held his ground, his eyes steady. "I deserve respect, just like anyone else." For a moment, Grant looked taken aback, as if the concept of a janitor demanding respect was incomprehensible. His surprise quickly turned to anger. "One more word, and I'll make sure you're out of here by morning." Sam didn't flinch. "Understood, sir." Grant stormed out, muttering under his breath, and Sam felt a surge of satisfaction. Grant's reaction had been exactly what he'd anticipated. The more rattled he became, the sloppier his actions would get, and Sam knew that exposing him was just a matter of time. As the days passed, Sam's small acts of defiance continued to unsettle Grant and his circle. They grew more irritable, more careless, snapping at other employees and complaining about minor inconveniences. The tension was building, and Sam could feel the shift in the air. People were starting to notice, and a quiet curiosity was growing around the mysterious, calm janitor who refused to break. Then, one night, Sarah found him again, her eyes wide with excitement. "There's talk about changes coming down from the top," she whispered. "Rumor has it the CEO's looking into complaints about workplace culture. Some people are terrified." Sam kept his expression neutral, but inside he felt a flicker of satisfaction. "That's good to hear." Sarah smiled, her eyes bright. "Maybe things will finally change around here." As she left, Sam felt a renewed sense of purpose. The board meeting was only days away, and he had all the evidence he needed to expose Grant's abuses. The time for observation was over. Soon he would reveal the truth and force the company to confront its own darkness. The day of the board meeting finally arrived, and the atmosphere at TechCore was charged with nervous energy. Word had spread through the office that the CEO himself was coming to address workplace culture concerns, and though no one knew exactly what that meant, there was a palpable sense of anxiety among the employees. Rumors of firings, demotions, and sweeping policy changes had been circulating all week, and everyone seemed on edge, especially those close to Grant. Sam spent the morning finishing up his cleaning rounds, noting the tense looks and whispered conversations happening in the hallways. He could feel the weight of the impending confrontation looming, but he remained calm. Today, after weeks of silently enduring and observing, he would finally have his moment to reveal the truth. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that this was for everyone who had been mistreated, not just for himself. As he headed toward the main conference room, where the board meeting was set to take place, he spotted Sarah standing nearby, watching him with a curious expression. She had heard about the meeting, but like everyone else, she had no idea of the role Sam was about to play. He gave her a small nod, silently assuring her that everything was under control. She returned his nod, a faint smile crossing her face. Inside the conference room, the company's top executives had gathered around the long, polished table. Grant sat near the head, his usual smug expression replaced with a look of unease. He drummed his fingers on the table, glancing around as though expecting an ambush. Colin and the rest of Grant's circle sat nearby, each looking equally uncomfortable. The door opened, and TechCore's CEO, Sam's father, entered the room, followed by Sam himself. The executives looked up, confusion flashing across their faces as they saw Sam in his janitor's uniform. Some exchanged puzzled glances, and Grant narrowed his eyes, his mouth twisting into a sneer as he watched Sam take a seat at the far end of the table, away from the others. The CEO took his place at the head of the table and addressed the room, his tone calm but commanding. "Thank you all for joining us today. I've called this meeting to discuss a critical issue within our company's culture. It's come to my attention that there have been serious concerns raised about the treatment of certain employees. I'd like to give one of our own an opportunity to speak on the matter." The room fell silent as he gestured for Sam to stand. Grant's sneer widened, and he leaned back in his chair, clearly amused by the idea of a janitor addressing the board. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sam began, keeping his tone steady and composed, "my name is Sam Darrow. Some of you may know me as the janitor who's been working here for the past several weeks. What you don't know is that I'm also the son of your CEO, and I've been here on an assignment to observe the culture at TechCore." A ripple of shock spread through the room. Grant's sneer vanished, replaced by a look of horror as he realized the implications of Sam's words. The other executives exchanged panicked glances, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Sam continued, his voice growing firmer as he addressed the room. "I came here to understand what it's like to work at the ground level of this company, to see how our employees are treated. What I found was a toxic environment where certain people in positions of power abuse their authority and demean those they consider beneath them." He looked directly at Grant, who sat frozen, his face pale. "I've witnessed verbal abuse, manipulation, and outright hostility toward employees who work hard and deserve respect. These actions aren't just unprofessional, they're fundamentally against everything this company claims to stand for." The silence in the room was deafening. Some executives looked down, avoiding Sam's gaze, while others appeared stunned, unable to process what was happening. Grant finally found his voice, his tone defensive and incredulous. "This is absurd," he said, laughing nervously. "You're accusing me and others in this room of mistreatment based on what? Some hearsay?" Sam didn't flinch. "No, not hearsay. I have specific examples witnessed firsthand, and I've documented each instance." He pulled out a small notebook, setting it on the table. "Every insult, every belittling remark, every abuse of power, it's all here. And it's not just my word. There are others in this company who can attest to the same treatment." Grant's expression shifted from disbelief to anger, his fists clenching as he struggled to maintain control. "This is ridiculous. You don't understand what it takes to manage a company at this level. Discipline and order are necessary, especially for people who—" "Who?" Sam cut him off, his voice calm but steely. "People who you think are less important. People who don't wear suits and sit in offices." Grant's face turned red, but he couldn't find the words to respond. Sam's father observed the exchange quietly, his gaze hardening as he watched Grant's reaction. Sam continued, addressing the entire room. "This isn't about discipline, it's about respect. Every person in this company, from the executives to the janitors, deserves to be treated with dignity. The behavior I've seen isn't just a personal failure, it's a failure of our company's values." Colin, who had been silent until now, spoke up, his tone a mixture of defensiveness and fear. "Look, maybe some things were said that shouldn't have been, but you can't hold us to every word spoken in frustration. We're under a lot of pressure." Sam shook his head. "Pressure doesn't justify treating people like they're disposable. If you can't handle the responsibility of leading without resorting to abuse, then maybe you shouldn't be in a leadership position." A tense silence followed his words. Some of the executives looked visibly shaken, realizing the gravity of the situation. Grant, however, seemed unable to accept it, his face twisting with resentment. The CEO finally spoke, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "I've seen enough. Grant, Colin, and others in this room, I'm deeply disappointed. This is not the culture I built this company on, and it's not one I intend to tolerate." Grant's face fell, his earlier confidence evaporating. "Sir, please, I've been with this company for years. I've—" And in those years, the CEO interrupted, his tone cold. "You seem to have forgotten what it means to lead with integrity. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Depending on the results, disciplinary actions, including possible termination, will follow." Grant's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The rest of the room sat in stunned silence as they watched one of the company's most powerful figures brought down by his own actions. Sam looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each executive in turn. This isn't about punishment. It's about making sure TechCore becomes the kind of company it claims to be, a place where everyone is valued. Changes will be made to ensure that no one else has to endure the kind of treatment I and others have faced. With that, he stepped back, letting his father take over. The CEO outlined a series of immediate changes, mandatory training programs, a new anonymous reporting system, and a review of the company's management practices. The executives listened in silence, realizing that the era of unchecked power was over. When the meeting adjourned, Sam left the room feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. The hardest part was over, but he knew his work was just beginning. There was a long road ahead to rebuild trust and create a healthier culture at TechCore. As he walked down the hallway, he saw Sarah waiting for him, a look of pride and admiration on her face. "You really did it," she said softly, her eyes shining. "I didn't think anyone would ever stand up to them." Sam smiled, feeling the weight of the past few weeks lift. They needed to be reminded that every person here matters. Sarah nodded, a hopeful smile spreading across her face. "I think things are finally going to change." Sam nodded in agreement. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but with allies like Sarah and a renewed sense of purpose, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Over the weeks following the board meeting, TechCore began to undergo sweeping changes. Sam's father, the CEO, stayed true to his word, pushing through a set of policies aimed at reshaping the company's culture from the ground up. Mandatory training sessions were scheduled for all staff, focusing on ethics, respect, and workplace inclusion. There were whispers of a new anonymous reporting system that would allow employees to submit complaints without fear of retaliation. For the first time, employees who had felt powerless had a voice, and the effects were already beginning to show. Sam, though now out of his janitor's uniform, continued to work closely with the teams overseeing these transformations. He wanted to ensure that the changes went beyond mere appearances and created a lasting impact. The work wasn't easy, but it was fulfilling in a way he hadn't anticipated. Walking through the halls, he noticed a subtle but undeniable shift in atmosphere. Staff members who had once rushed past without so much as a glance now greeted him warmly, and he could sense a newfound camaraderie among employees across different levels of the company. One day, as Sam was reviewing the preliminary results of the new workplace surveys in a shared office space, he felt a presence behind him. He turned to see Sarah standing there, her face glowing with excitement. "Did you see the latest survey results?" she asked, barely able to contain her enthusiasm. Sam smiled, nodding. "It's a good start. People are actually opening up about their experiences." Sarah beamed. "I never thought I'd see the day when people here felt safe enough to speak their minds. It's like you opened the door for all of us." Sam felt a warmth in his chest. He had taken this journey to better understand the company his father built. But along the way, he had come to see the importance of this change for people like Sarah. She had been one of the few who had shown kindness to him during his days as a janitor, and seeing her hopeful now reminded him of why he'd started all of this. As he glanced back at the survey results, a familiar face caught his eye. Martin Grant was walking past the office, his expression far more subdued than Sam had ever seen it. Since his suspension, Grant had been allowed to return to work in a limited capacity, stripped of his authority and subjected to the same workplace expectations as everyone else. It was a stark contrast to the man who once wielded his power with an iron fist, and his fall from grace had been the subject of much quiet discussion among employees. Grant caught sight of Sam and paused, his gaze darkening. For a moment, he looked as if he wanted to say something, but instead, he simply nodded curtly and walked on. Sam watched him go, feeling a mix of pity and satisfaction. He knew Grant was unlikely to change, but it was gratifying to know that he would no longer be able to abuse his position unchecked. That evening, Sam joined his father for a quiet dinner in the city. It was rare for the two of them to have time alone together, and the events of the past few months had given their relationship new depth. As they sat in a small, dimly lit restaurant, Sam's father raised his glass, looking at his son with pride. "You've done incredible work, Sam," he said. "More than I ever imagined when we started this." Sam smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment he hadn't expected. Thank you. It was tough, but I'm glad we went through with it. TechCore needed this. His father nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's a reminder of how easy it is to lose sight of what really matters in a company. Power can blind people, make them forget that leadership is about service, not dominance. Sam took a sip of his drink, considering his father's words. There's still a lot to do, though. We can't let things go back to the way they were. We won't, his father replied firmly. You have my word. Their conversation turned to lighter topics, but as they left the restaurant, Sam felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. His father had given him the opportunity to make a difference, but maintaining the change would require constant vigilance. He knew that he couldn't afford to let complacency seep back into the culture they were working so hard to transform. Back at TechCore, the days began to blend into a rhythm of meetings, policy reviews, and training sessions. Sam worked tirelessly, determined to ensure that every layer of the company embraced the new vision. But change, he realized, was never straightforward. There were those who embraced the new direction, grateful for the shift in company values. Others, however, resisted, preferring the old ways and quietly undermining the new policies. One such day, Sam received a complaint from the HR department. Anonymously submitted, it detailed subtle acts of sabotage occurring within the operations team. The report mentioned tampered schedules, mysterious delays, and a growing undercurrent of dissatisfaction among certain employees. Sam's gut told him that Grant might be involved, but he needed proof. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Sam began to discreetly investigate, speaking to people in the operations team, observing their work, and listening for any mention of discontent. He discovered that while Grant's influence had waned, a few loyalists still looked up to him, resenting the recent changes that had dethroned their leader. Though they didn't openly defy the new policies, they were subtly working to undermine the culture shift, hoping that the changes would be reversed. One evening, as Sam was walking down a quiet hallway, he overheard hushed voices coming from an open door in the break room. He recognized Grant's voice, lowered but unmistakably filled with resentment. They're making a mockery of this place, Grant was saying, his tone venomous. The whole company's gone soft. We used to be respected, feared even. Now it's all about bending over backwards for the little people. A chorus of murmured agreements followed. They think this new direction will last, Grant continued. Just wait. The CEO will see reason. All we need to do is hold out. Sam's heart pounded as he listened. Grant was planning to wait out the changes, hoping that his father would eventually relent. It was a reminder of just how deeply entrenched the toxic culture had been and how much resistance they still faced. Sam decided to confront him the next day. Grant needed to understand that the changes were here to stay. The following morning, he approached Grant's office, knocking firmly on the door. Grant looked up as he entered, his face contorting into a sneer when he saw who it was. To what do I owe the pleasure? Grant asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Sam closed the door behind him, standing tall as he met Grant's gaze. I know what you're doing, Grant. I heard you last night talking about waiting things out. Grant's sneer faltered slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. I don't know what you think you heard, but I have every right to express my opinions about the direction of this company. Opinions are one thing, Sam replied coldly. Sabotage is another. We both know you've been quietly encouraging people to resist the changes, hoping that things will go back to the way they were. But I'm here to tell you that it's not going to happen. Grant laughed, though it lacked conviction. You're just a kid who played at being a janitor for a few weeks. You don't understand how things really work here. Sam held his ground, his voice unwavering. I understand more than you think. I understand that you used your position to bully, humiliate, and control people. And now that you've lost that power, you can't stand it. But let me be clear, if you continue to resist, there will be consequences. Grant's face flushed with anger, but he said nothing. The silence between them was tense, charged with unspoken animosity. Finally, Sam turned and left, feeling a surge of resolve. He knew that Grant would not change easily, but he was determined to protect the progress they'd made, even if it meant pushing back against those who resisted. In the weeks that followed, Sam's vigilance paid off. He implemented additional checks within the operations team, making it clear that any signs of sabotage would be met with immediate action. Slowly, the pockets of resistance began to dissipate, and the atmosphere continued to improve as employees saw that the new policies were here to stay. As the company moved forward, Sam felt a growing sense of accomplishment. He had faced down the remnants of the old regime, proving that he was more than just the CEO's son. He was someone who cared deeply about the people and values of TechCore, and though the road to true cultural change was long, he knew they were on the right path. One evening, Sarah stopped by his office, smiling warmly. "You really did it, Sam. Things feel different around here. In a good way." Sam nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. "We did it, Sarah, all of us." She smiled, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you for giving us a voice." As he watched her leave, Sam realized that the journey had changed him, too. He had come to understand the weight of leadership and the importance of standing up for what was right. And as he looked out at the company he had helped reshape, he knew that TechCore's future was finally in safe hands. In the months following the sweeping changes at TechCore, Sam continued his work with quiet determination. He had become a fixture in the company, no longer as the CEO's son, or even as an undercover janitor, but as a legitimate figure of authority. His efforts had gradually reshaped the environment, and a new sense of openness began to define the company culture. Employees, especially those who had once felt unseen or unvalued, now felt empowered to speak up, and Sam was at the forefront of this transformation. One of the most significant changes was the establishment of a new committee on workplace ethics, which Sam led with Sarah's help. The committee met bi-weekly to address concerns, review complaints, and ensure that the company was upholding the standards they had set in place. The culture of fear had been replaced by one of accountability and respect. Managers who had once overlooked or belittled their employees were now required to attend monthly training sessions focused on leadership, empathy, and ethical management. However, despite the progress, Sam was well aware that the shift in culture was fragile. There were still remnants of resistance, particularly among a small group of senior employees who had thrived under the old regime. They maintained a low profile, but Sam knew they resented the changes and were waiting for an opportunity to undermine him. One afternoon, as Sam was finishing a meeting with the ethics committee, he received a message from his father's executive assistant, asking him to come to his father's office. Sam made his way up to the executive floor, a place he'd rarely visited since his days undercover, and knocked on the door. "Come in," his father's voice called from inside. Sam entered to find his father seated at his desk reviewing a document. He looked up, his expression serious. "Sam, thank you for coming. There's something I need to discuss with you." Sam took a seat, his curiosity piqued. "Is everything all right?" His father set the document aside and leaned forward. "I've been approached by several board members recently. They're concerned about the amount of change happening within the company and whether it's sustainable. They worry that we might be alienating certain senior members of the team, the ones who have been here the longest." Sam's jaw tightened. He knew exactly who his father was referring to, the small group of executives who had resisted his efforts from the start. Do they realize those same people were responsible for the toxic environment we're trying to fix? His father nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful. "They do, but some board members believe that we may have pushed too hard, too fast. They're asking for a return to stability and balance. In other words, they want to slow down the reforms." Sam felt a surge of frustration. "After everything we've worked for, they want us to go back to the way things were." "No, not entirely," his father said quickly. "They just think we should consider a more gradual approach to the changes. They're worried that we risk losing valuable talent if we continue pushing the older executives out." "Valuable talent," Sam echoed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Most of those people contributed nothing but hostility and elitism to this company. They're part of the reason we had to make these changes in the first place." His father sighed, clearly troubled by the tension between the old guard and the new direction. "I understand, Sam, I really do. But the board has its concerns and they're not without influence. I don't want to undo your work, but we may need to find a way to keep everyone on board, at least for the time being." Sam leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had worked tirelessly to dismantle the old culture and replace it with something better, and now it felt as though those efforts were under threat. The thought of compromising, of allowing the very people who had poisoned TechCore's environment to regain their influence, was almost unbearable. After a long pause, Sam spoke, his voice steady. "I understand the board's position, but I won't let these changes be undone. We've come too far to go back now." His father looked at him with a mixture of pride and worry. "I know, Sam, and I believe in what you've done. But we need to approach this carefully. Maybe there's a way to keep the board reassured while maintaining our progress." Sam nodded, though his frustration remained. He knew he would have to handle the situation delicately, but he refused to let the old culture regain a foothold. As he left his father's office, he resolved to strengthen the reforms even further, to make it impossible for anyone to reverse them. Over the next few weeks, Sam worked tirelessly, focusing on embedding the new policies more deeply into the company's structure. He introduced additional accountability measures, requiring managers to undergo quarterly evaluations based on employee feedback. He also began to implement a mentorship program, pairing newer employees with experienced mentors who embraced the company's new direction. He wanted to ensure that the next generation of leaders would carry forward the values he was instilling now. Despite his efforts, Sam felt the subtle pushback from the older executives growing stronger. Rumors began circulating that he was overstepping, that he was too young to understand the company's needs, that his reforms were disrupting the company's natural order. The whispers were quiet, but they carried an undercurrent of resentment that was hard to ignore. One evening, as Sam was reviewing reports in his office, Sarah walked in, her expression troubled. "Sam, I just heard something that you need to know about," she said, closing the door behind her. Sam looked up, concerned. "What's going on?" "Grant," she said quietly. "He's been meeting with some of the other senior executives. They're talking about taking their complaints to the board, trying to push for a vote of no confidence in the new policies." Sam's eyes narrowed. "Grant's leading this?" Sarah nodded. "He's been careful, keeping it quiet, but he's rallying those who are unhappy with the changes. They're saying that the new culture is destabilizing, that it's lowering productivity." Sam clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath the surface. He had expected some resistance, but a direct challenge to the policies was more than he had anticipated. If Grant and his followers managed to convince the board, it could jeopardize everything he'd worked for. "Thank you for telling me, Sarah," Sam said, his mind racing with possibilities. "We can't let them undo this." Sarah nodded. "You have my support, Sam. And there are others who believe in what you're doing. We're not going to let them take us back to the way things were." Sam spent the next few days preparing for the potential challenge. He gathered data on the improvements in employee satisfaction, productivity, and retention since the reforms had been implemented. He met with allies within the company, ensuring they understood the stakes and were ready to support him if the issue came to a vote. When the board meeting finally arrived, Sam entered the room with quiet determination. Grant and several of his allies were seated on one side of the table, their expressions smug and confident. The tension was thick as the meeting began, and Sam could feel the weight of the challenge before him. The board members listened as Grant and his followers presented their case, citing concerns about instability and a loss of productivity. They argued that the new policies were creating confusion and resentment, and that a return to the old ways would restore the company's efficiency. Sam remained silent, letting them speak, but his gaze never wavered from Grant's. When it was finally his turn, Sam stood, addressing the board with a steady, calm voice. He presented the data he had gathered, showing the tangible benefits of the new policies, increased employee engagement, improved morale, and a notable decrease in turnover. He shared testimonials from employees who felt safer and more valued under the new culture, and he emphasized the long-term benefits of a respectful, inclusive workplace. "This isn't just about short-term productivity," he said, meeting the eyes of each board member. "It's about building a company where every person feels valued and empowered to contribute their best. We've already seen positive results, and I believe that if we continue on this path, we'll create a stronger, more resilient tech core." The board members exchanged glances, clearly weighing the evidence. Grant shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his earlier smugness replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. He had underestimated Sam, and it was becoming clear that the board was seriously considering Sam's arguments. After a lengthy discussion, the board voted in favor of retaining the new policies, with a few minor adjustments to address specific concerns. Sam felt a surge of relief as the decision was announced. The reforms would remain in place, and the resistance from the old guard had been effectively neutralized. As the meeting adjourned, Grant stormed out, his face flushed with anger. Sam watched him go, feeling a sense of closure. Grant's influence was finally broken, and the path forward was clear. In the days that followed, Sam continued his work with renewed vigor, knowing that he had the board's support and the trust of the employees who believed in him. TechCore had weathered the storm, and he was determined to make sure it stayed on course, creating a lasting legacy of respect, integrity, and empowerment. The old culture was gone, and in its place, a new, stronger foundation had taken root. Sam knew there would be challenges ahead, but with allies like Sarah and the strength of the team he had built, he was ready to face whatever came next. The weeks that followed the board meeting were a whirlwind of activity at TechCore. Sam felt invigorated as he stepped into his new role, fully embracing the responsibilities that came with being a change agent within the company. The initial resistance had faded, and the atmosphere in the office buzzed with newfound energy and optimism. Employees, once hesitant, were now more willing to engage with one another, share ideas, and contribute to the ongoing dialogue about workplace culture. Sam had initiated regular feedback sessions where employees could voice their thoughts on the changes and suggest improvements. These sessions quickly became a cornerstone of TechCore's evolving culture, providing a platform for voices that had long gone unheard. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with many employees expressing their gratitude for the opportunity to participate in shaping their work environment. As the weeks progressed, Sam found himself often in the company of Sarah. Their collaborative efforts had grown into a strong partnership, and together, they worked on implementing additional programs designed to foster inclusion and respect across all levels of the organization. Sarah's insight into the logistics of team dynamics complemented Sam's vision, and the two made a formidable pair. One afternoon, while reviewing employee engagement surveys in their shared office, Sarah looked up, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know, Sam, we've done a lot to improve the culture here, but I think we should focus more on mentorship. There are so many young employees who could really benefit from guidance and support from more experienced team members." Sam leaned back in his chair, considering her suggestion. "That's a great idea. We've seen the impact of mentorship in other organizations, and it aligns perfectly with our goal of fostering an inclusive environment." "Exactly," Sarah replied, her enthusiasm growing. "If we pair newer employees with mentors from different departments, we can not only help them navigate their roles but also create cross-departmental relationships that enhance collaboration." Sam nodded, feeling the excitement build within him. "Let's develop a proposal for the mentorship program. We can present it at the next committee meeting." They worked diligently over the next few days, creating a framework for the mentorship initiative that included objectives, structure, and potential mentors. Sam reached out to employees across the company, encouraging them to participate as mentors and share their experiences. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many seasoned employees eager to support their colleagues. As the mentorship program began to take shape, Sam received an unexpected visit from his father, who arrived at the office unannounced one morning. Sam was surprised but pleased to see him, and he quickly led his father into his office. "I just wanted to check in on how things are going," his father said, taking a seat. "The board is pleased with the changes, but I wanted to hear it from you directly." "It's been great, Dad," Sam replied, smiling. "The feedback from employees has been overwhelmingly positive, and we're making real progress in building a supportive culture." His father nodded, clearly proud of what Sam had accomplished. "I've been hearing some good things about the mentorship program you're developing. That could be a game changer for us." "It will be," Sam said confidently. "It'll help bridge the gaps between departments and foster relationships that will make TechCore stronger." As they talked, Sam felt a sense of accomplishment swell within him. His father had always been a formidable figure in his life, but the progress they had made together at TechCore was a testament to Sam's growth. He was no longer just his father's son, he was a leader in his own right, driving meaningful change. However, as the momentum continued to build, so did the shadows of dissent. A few weeks later, during a routine meeting, Sam began to notice subtle signs that some employees were still clinging to the old ways. He saw discontent flickering in the eyes of a few seasoned managers during discussions, especially when new initiatives were introduced. While most embraced the changes, a small faction remained resistant, and Sam knew he had to address it before it grew into a larger issue. One afternoon, as he prepared for another committee meeting, Sam received an anonymous email that sent a chill down his spine. It contained a series of accusations against him, claiming he was overstepping his bounds as the CEO's son, and that he was trying to dismantle the foundational structure of TechCore. The email suggested that he was engaging in nepotism and favoring those who supported him while ostracizing those who didn't. Sam felt anger and frustration rise within him. He had worked hard to build a more inclusive culture, and the suggestion that he was undermining the very people he sought to empower was infuriating. He knew that Grant's loyalists were trying to sow discord, but he refused to let them succeed. He took a deep breath and decided to confront the issue head-on. At the next committee meeting, Sam presented the email to the group, framing it as an opportunity for open dialogue. "I received this email, and while I won't reveal who sent it, I want to address the concerns it raises. It's clear that not everyone is happy with the changes we're implementing. I want to hear your thoughts." The room fell silent, and Sam could feel the tension thickening the air. After a moment, one of the senior managers spoke up, his voice cautious. "Sam, I think some of us are just concerned about how quickly things are changing. It feels like we're losing the essence of what TechCore was built on. Another voice chimed in, expressing a similar sentiment. We appreciate the efforts to improve culture, but change can be unsettling, especially for those of us who have been here for a long time. Sam took a deep breath, recognizing that this was a crucial moment. I understand that change can be uncomfortable, but I believe it's necessary for our growth. The essence of TechCore is not about maintaining the status quo. It's about evolving to meet the needs of our employees and the market. I want to ensure that everyone here feels valued and empowered to contribute. Gradually, the discussion shifted from accusations to a more constructive conversation. Employees began to voice their fears and frustrations, and Sam listened intently. By allowing them to express their concerns, he was able to address misconceptions and reinforce the value of the new culture. After the meeting, Sarah approached Sam, her expression serious. That was a smart move, bringing up the email like that. But I'm worried that the dissenters might regroup and become more vocal. We need to stay ahead of this. Sam nodded, acknowledging her concern. I know. I think we need to be proactive in reinforcing the positive aspects of the changes. Maybe we should hold a company-wide meeting to showcase the successes we've had since implementing the new policies. Sarah's eyes brightened with enthusiasm. That's a great idea. If we can highlight employee testimonials and share the data we've collected, it could go a long way toward quelling any lingering discontent. As they planned for the company-wide meeting, Sam felt a sense of urgency. This wasn't just about promoting the changes, it was about solidifying a culture that valued every employee. He reached out to various teams across the company, gathering stories and feedback to share during the meeting. The day of the meeting arrived, and Sam stood at the front of the auditorium, looking out at the sea of faces. Employees filled the seats, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. He felt a mixture of excitement and nerves, but was determined to convey the importance of the moment. Thank you all for coming today, Sam began, his voice steady. I want to take this opportunity to reflect on the journey we've been on together, and to celebrate the progress we've made. Change is never easy, but I believe we are moving in a direction that will make TechCore a better place for everyone. As he shared the stories and successes that had emerged from the changes, the energy in the room began to shift. Employees started to nod, and some even clapped as he highlighted individuals who had stepped up and embraced the new culture. It was a celebration of unity and resilience. After the meeting, many employees approached Sam, expressing their appreciation and excitement for the future. The positive feedback fueled his determination, and he knew they were building a community grounded in respect and collaboration. But as the excitement settled, Sam was still keenly aware of the undercurrents of discontent that lingered. He needed to stay vigilant. Despite the progress, the remnants of the old culture were not completely extinguished. A few days later, as he was leaving the office, he ran into Grant in the parking lot. The former executive looked more haggard than Sam had ever seen him, his face lined with frustration. Nice speech the other day, Grant sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. It's easy to stand in front of a crowd and play the hero when you have nothing to lose. Sam held his ground, refusing to back down. You know as well as I do that the changes we're making are for the better. The old ways weren't working, and we can't go back. Grant stepped closer, his tone low and menacing. You think you've won, but this isn't over. There are still plenty of us who remember what this company was built on, and we won't let you destroy it. Sam's heart raced, but he maintained his composure. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm trying to build something that lasts. If you truly care about TechCore, you'll realize that the changes are necessary. Or maybe you're just a kid playing at being a leader, Grant shot back. We'll see how long that lasts. With that, Grant turned and walked away, leaving Sam standing there, the weight of the threat heavy on his shoulders. He knew that the struggle wasn't over. Grant's anger and resentment could still pose a risk to everything he had worked to achieve. Determined not to let fear take hold, Sam reached out to Sarah and the members of the ethics committee. They needed to stay united, to reinforce the progress they had made, and to remain vigilant against any attempts to undermine their efforts. Together, they planned a series of workshops aimed at fostering team spirit and collaboration, aiming to bring employees together across departments and combat the lingering divisions. As the weeks turned into months, Sam poured his energy into strengthening TechCore's culture, convinced that a solid foundation would protect against the fractures that still threatened. The mentorship program launched successfully, and Sam began to see the fruits of their labor as employees connected in meaningful ways. Yet the shadow of Grant and his followers loomed large. Sam could sense that the old guard was still plotting, and he steeled himself for the inevitable confrontation that was sure to come. He was determined to protect the progress they had made, no matter what it took. As he prepared for the next round of workshops, Sam reminded himself of the journey they had all undertaken. Change was never easy, but he believed that together, they could create a company that not only thrived but flourished, a place where every employee felt valued, respected, and empowered to contribute. With that belief guiding him, Sam felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that the future of TechCore depended on their collective strength and resolve.